Hello everyone, and welcome back. We treat the highway like a lifeline, a straight path from point A to point B. But ask any long-haul trucker, and they'll tell you the road has a memory. Tonight, we're opening 5 logbooks that should have been burned. From a convoy driven by the dead in Nebraska to a hitchhiker who warns of accidents that haven't happened yet. These are the miles that don't appear on any map. Before you get too cozy, do me a favor, check your doors, dim the lights, and if you enjoy the escape I bring you, hit that like button and subscribe. It tells YouTube you want more of these stories in your feed. Let me know in the comments. What time is it where you are right now? It's always midnight somewhere. Now, let's shift gears into the darkness. Story 1. I still have nightmares about Highway 20 through Nebraska. I have been driving truck for 11 years now, and I thought I had seen every kind of danger the road could throw at me. Bad weather, mechanical failures, aggressive drivers, even a couple of close calls with drunk drivers weaving across lanes. But nothing prepared me for what happened to me on that stretch of rural highway in September of 2023. Nothing could have prepared me for the convoy. It was the 3rd week of September, and I was hauling agricultural equipment from Sioux Falls down to Grand Island. The route takes you through some of the most remote farmland in America, mile after mile of harvested cornfields and empty 2-lane highways where you might see another vehicle every 20 minutes if you are lucky. Highway 20 runs east to west through the northern part of Nebraska, and during harvest season, it is usually pretty quiet. Most of the grain trucks use the interstate further south. I had left Sioux Falls around 4 p.m. and the sun was starting to get low in the sky by the time I crossed into Nebraska. The weather was clear and cool, perfect driving conditions, and I was making good time. My delivery was not until the next morning, so I was planning to stop at a truck stop in O'Neill for the night. Get some dinner, maybe watch a little television in my sleeper cab, and get a decent rest before finishing the run in the morning. Around 6 p.m., just as the sun was setting, I noticed 3 trucks ahead of me on the highway. They were maybe half a mile in front, moving in perfect formation, 2 in the right lane and 1 in the left, like they were traveling together as a convoy. That was not particularly unusual. Sometimes drivers who know each other will travel in groups for company or safety. What was unusual was their speed. They were only doing about 45 miles per hour on a highway where the limit was 65. I was catching up to them quickly, and I figured they must be having mechanical problems or maybe hauling an oversized load that required slower speeds. As I got closer, though, I could see that their loads looked normal. Standard 53-foot trailers. Nothing oversized or particularly heavy-looking. I flashed my headlights a couple of times, the universal trucker signal that I wanted to pass, but none of the 3 trucks moved over or acknowledged me in any way. They just kept rolling at that same steady 45 miles per hour in their tight formation. I tried calling them on my CB radio, channel 19, asking if they needed help or if they could move over so I could pass. Nothing, just static. By this point, I was only about 200 feet behind them, and I was starting to get frustrated. The sun had set completely now, and in the growing darkness, I could see their running lights and the silhouettes of the drivers in their cabs. Something about those silhouettes made me uneasy, though I could not quite figure out what it was. They were too still, too rigid. I decided to pass them on the left since the road was clear ahead and I had plenty of visibility. I moved into the left lane and started to accelerate past the rightmost truck. That was when I got my first good look at the driver and my blood went cold. The driver was wearing what looked like a burlap sack over his head. I could see it clearly in my headlights as I pulled alongside. It was tied at the neck with rough rope, and the fabric was stretched tight over what I assumed was a face underneath. But the driver was not moving. Not at all. His hands were on the steering wheel in the perfect 10-2 position, but they were completely motionless. No adjustments, no corrections, nothing. I stared at that burlap-covered head for maybe 5 seconds, and then I saw something that made my stomach drop. The hands on the steering wheel were the wrong color. They were grayish and waxy looking, and the fingers were bent at angles that did not look natural. Those were not the hands of a living person. I hit the gas and accelerated past that first truck, my heart pounding. As I pulled alongside the second truck, I looked over and saw the same thing. Burlap sack over the head, motionless posture, those awful dead-looking hands on the wheel. I could see now that the burlap had dark stains on it, like something had soaked through from inside. The third truck was in the left lane ahead of me, blocking my path. I was trapped between them now, boxed in by this convoy of ghost trucks with their burlap-headed drivers. I tried to slow down and fall back behind them, but as soon as I touched my brakes, the truck behind me accelerated slightly, closing the gap. They were matching my speed. That was when I saw the deer. It ran out of the cornfield on the right side of the highway, directly into the path of the lead truck in the right lane. I watched in horror as the truck hit the deer at 45 miles per hour. The animal's body flew up over the hood and rolled across the windshield with a sickening thud. But the truck did not brake. It did not swerve. The burlap-headed driver just kept going like nothing had happened. And as the truck passed under a streetlight, I saw the driver's head loll sideways at an impossible angle before slowly tilting back to center. I realized with absolute certainty that those were not drivers in those cabs. They were corpses. Dead bodies dressed in flannel shirts and jeans, with burlap sacks over their heads to hide their faces, propped up in the driver's seats of trucks that were being controlled remotely or by some automated system I could not see. I grabbed my CB radio again and started calling for help on every channel I could think of. Mayday, this is a driver on Highway 20 eastbound near mile marker 168. I need police assistance immediately. I am being boxed in by 3 trucks and the drivers are dead. I repeat, the drivers are dead. Nothing but static came back. I tried my cell phone, but there was no signal, which was not unusual this far out in rural Nebraska, but seemed like a terrible coincidence at that moment. I was trapped in a rolling prison made of 80,000 pounds of steel and rubber, surrounded by trucks piloted by corpses. Then I saw the headlights in my rear-view mirror. A black SUV had appeared behind the convoy, maybe a quarter-mile back. It was gaining on us slowly but steadily. I did not know who was in that SUV, but I knew with absolute certainty that they were the ones controlling this nightmare convoy. And I knew that this was a trap. The realization hit me like a freight train. This was an organized hijacking operation. They were using these remotely controlled trucks with corpses at the wheel to create a moving barricade, boxing in their target truck and forcing it to slow down until they could move in for the kill. The victims probably thought they were just dealing with slow drivers or maybe an oversized load convoy. By the time they realized something was wrong, it was too late. And those corpses in the driver's seats, those were probably previous victims. Other truck drivers who had been killed and were now being used as macabre puppets to help trap the next target. The thought made me want to vomit, but I did not have time for that. I needed to get out of this box before the SUV caught up. I looked around desperately for an escape route. The highway was arrow straight with deep ditches on both sides and cornfields beyond that. But about half a mile ahead I could see a turnoff, maybe a county road or a farm access road. If I could break out of the convoy before we reached that turnoff, I might be able to escape. The problem was that the trucks had me boxed in perfectly. There was one on my right side, one in front of me, and one behind me. The only open space was to my left, but that was the oncoming traffic lane, and I could see headlights approaching in the distance. I was running out of time and out of options. That was when I noticed that the truck in front of me was drifting slightly to the right. Just a few inches, barely noticeable, but enough to create a small gap between it and the center line. It was probably an imperfection in the remote control system, or maybe the dead driver's body had shifted slightly, pulling the wheel, but it gave me an idea. I accelerated hard and jerked my steering wheel to the left, cutting into the oncoming lane. The approaching headlights were closer now, maybe half a mile away and coming fast. I floored the accelerator and my truck lurched forward, engine screaming. I pulled alongside the lead truck and could see the burlap-headed corpse in the driver's seat, swaying slightly with the motion of the vehicle. The burlap sack had torn slightly near the mouth area, and I could see something dark and dried underneath. I forced myself to look away. The oncoming headlights were getting closer, a quarter mile now. I could see it was a pickup truck and it was not slowing down. Why would it? From their perspective, they just saw a truck passing on a straight stretch of highway. They had no idea what was happening. I pulled ahead of the convoy just as the pickup truck flashed past me with maybe 10 feet to spare. The driver laid on his horn, and I saw him shoot me a gesture as he passed, but I did not care. I was clear of the box. I immediately swerved right and cut across the front of the lead truck, nearly clipping its bumper. I could see the county road turnoff coming up fast, maybe 200 yards ahead. Behind me, the convoy had broken formation and the black SUV was accelerating, trying to close the distance. I hit my brakes hard and jerked the wheel to the right, taking the turnoff at 50 miles per hour. My trailer fishtailed wildly, and I heard something in my load shift with a loud crash. For a horrible second, I thought I was going to jackknife and roll the truck, but the tires caught and I managed to straighten out. The county road was gravel and dirt, barely wide enough for my truck. Tree branches scraped along both sides of my trailer as I plowed down the narrow road, my headlights bouncing wildly over the rough surface. In my mirrors, I could see the black SUV had taken the turn behind me and was gaining fast. The 3 corpse-driven trucks had continued on the highway. Apparently, their programming did not include pursuit down side roads. The SUV was maybe 100 yards behind me now, and I could see there were at least 2 people in it. I pressed the accelerator to the floor, but my heavy load and the rough road surface meant I could only manage about 35 miles per hour. They were going to catch me. Then I saw salvation ahead. The county road crossed over a small irrigation canal with a narrow wooden bridge that looked like it had been built sometime in the 1950s. There was a weight limit sign posted that I could not quite read in the darkness, but I knew that bridge was never designed to hold an 80,000-pound truck and trailer. I did not have a choice. I kept my speed up and hit that bridge without slowing down. The wooden planks groaned and cracked under my weight. I heard a loud splintering sound and felt the bridge sag beneath me, but my momentum carried me across and I made it to the other side. Barely. I stopped about 50 yards past the bridge and looked back. The black SUV had stopped at the bridge entrance. I could see 2 men standing next to it, staring at the damaged bridge that was now impassable. One of them was holding what looked like a rifle. They stood there for a long moment, then got back in the SUV and turned around. I sat there in my cab, shaking uncontrollably, for I do not know how long. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. I tried my cell phone again, and this time I had 1 bar of signal, just enough to call 911. The Nebraska State Patrol took my call seriously, especially when I told them about the 3 trucks with dead bodies at the wheel. They dispatched units to search Highway 20 and sent a patrol car to meet me at my location. It took them about 30 minutes to find me on that back county road, and by that time I'd gotten out of my truck and vomited twice in the ditch. The troopers found the 3 trucks about 10 miles further east on Highway 20. They were parked at an abandoned grain elevator, arranged in a neat line. The burlap-headed corpses were still in the driver's seats. When the crime scene investigators examined the trucks, they found sophisticated remote control systems installed in the engine compartments, connected to the steering, throttle, and brakes. The trucks could be operated from a distance using radio signals. The bodies were identified as 3 missing truck drivers who had disappeared over the previous 6 months on various highways in Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. All 3 had been shot execution style, and their bodies had been preserved with chemicals and dressed in clean work clothes. The burlap sacks over their heads were held in place with wire that went through their jaws to keep the heads upright. The FBI agent who interviewed me explained that they had been investigating a series of truck hijackings across the Midwest for almost a year. The criminal organization would identify valuable cargo by monitoring CB radio traffic and truck stop conversations. Then they would use the remote-controlled convoy to box in the target truck on a remote stretch of highway, force it to slow down, and move in with a chase vehicle to execute the driver and steal the cargo. The corpses in the driver's seat served 2 purposes. First, they made the convoy look normal from a distance. 3 trucks traveling together was not unusual. Second, they were a psychological weapon. The moment a target driver realized what he was looking at in those cabs, he would freeze up for a few critical seconds, long enough for the chase vehicle to close the distance. The agent said I was the first driver to escape the trap once it had been sprung. The others had either crashed while trying to escape, or had been forced to stop by the convoy and then killed by the team in the chase vehicle. My load of agricultural equipment had been flagged as a potential target because the equipment was worth about $200,000 and could be easily resold. They never caught the people in the black SUV. By the time law enforcement could set up roadblocks, they had disappeared into the network of county roads and farm tracks that crisscross rural Nebraska. The FBI suspects they were part of a larger criminal organization that has probably moved their operation to a different region. I quit driving long-haul routes after that night. I took a local job driving for a construction company, home every night, same routes every day. I could not handle the isolation of those long, empty highways anymore. Every time I saw a convoy of trucks in the distance, I would start to panic. Every time another truck pulled up alongside me, I would tense up waiting to see what was behind the wheel. The worst part is thinking about the other drivers who were not as lucky as I was. The 3 men whose bodies were used as puppets in that convoy had families, people who loved them and wondered what happened to them. And how many other drivers disappeared before the FBI started connecting the cases? How many of them are buried in shallow graves in cornfields or weighted down in irrigation canals across the Midwest? I still drive past that turnoff on Highway 20 sometimes when I'm heading to a job site. I always slow down and look at that county road disappearing into the cornfields. The wooden bridge has been replaced now with a modern concrete structure. But I remember what it looked like that night, groaning and cracking under the weight of my truck as I raced across it trying to escape. Sometimes late at night I think about those burlap-covered faces in the trucks. I wonder if the men driving those trucks knew what was happening to them in their final moments. I wonder if they had families waiting at home who never got to say goodbye. And I wonder if somewhere out there another convoy is rolling down a dark highway with corpses at the wheel, waiting to box in the next unlucky driver who happens to cross their path. You can never really escape something like that. It stays with you. Every time I get behind the wheel now, even just driving my pickup truck to the grocery store, I find myself watching the other vehicles a little too carefully, looking at the drivers a little too long, making sure they are moving, breathing, alive. The road takes things from you. Your time, your health, your peace of mind. But that night on Highway 20, I learned that sometimes the road tries to take everything, and sometimes you get lucky enough to escape with your life, even if you never quite escape the memory of what almost happened. I still wake up some nights in a cold sweat, dreaming about burlap sacks and dead hands on steering wheels and headlights closing in from behind. And I wonder how many other drivers out there have seen things they cannot explain, experienced things they cannot talk about, and escaped traps they did not even know existed until it was almost too late. The highway is a dangerous place, but the real danger is not always what you expect. Sometimes it is the truck next to you, driving a little too slow, with a driver who sits a little too still. And by the time you realize something is wrong, you might already be boxed in with nowhere to run. That is what happened to me on Highway 20 in the fall of 2023. And that is why I will never drive that stretch of road again after dark. Some places hold too many bad memories, and some memories are too strong to ever really escape. Story 2. I have been driving truck across the Southwest for 12 years now. And in all that time, I have made it a strict rule never to pick up hitchhikers. The companies do not allow it, the insurance does not cover it, and honestly, you just never know who you might be letting into your cab. But on a freezing night in February 3 years ago on Highway 50 through Nevada, I broke that rule. And what happened in the hours that followed still makes me question everything I thought I understood about time, fate, and whether some things are just meant to happen no matter what we do to prevent them. It was around 9:30 at night and I was hauling computer equipment from Reno to Salt Lake City. Highway 50 through Nevada is called the loneliest road in America for good reason. You can drive for an hour without seeing another car, and the towns are so far apart that if you break down between them, you are in serious trouble. It is just empty desert stretching in all directions, with mountains in the distance, and a sky so full of stars that it almost hurts to look at. The temperature had dropped to about 15 degrees, and the weather forecast was calling for snow later that night. I had my heater cranked up and my CB radio on, listening to the occasional trucker passing through the area. The highway was mostly empty except for a few cars here and there, and I was making good time. That is when I saw him standing on the side of the road about a quarter-mile ahead. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, because who in their right mind would be hitchhiking on Highway 50 in the middle of winter at night? But as I got closer, I could see it was definitely a man, maybe in his 40s, wearing what looked like a light jacket that was completely inadequate for the weather. He had his thumb out, and even from a distance I could tell he was shivering. My first instinct was to keep driving. Company policy was clear, and I had passed plenty of hitchhikers over the years without a second thought. But something about this guy made me hesitate. Maybe it was the temperature, or maybe it was the fact that we were literally 50 miles from the nearest town in either direction. If I left him out there, he would probably freeze to death before morning. I slowed down and pulled over onto the shoulder about 50 feet past where he was standing. I watched in my mirror as he jogged up to my passenger door, and when I rolled down the window, I got my first good look at him. He was younger than I had thought, maybe late 30s, with dark hair and a thin face that looked exhausted. His jacket was not just light, it was torn in several places, and he was not wearing gloves or a hat. He should have been on the verge of hypothermia. "Thank you for stopping," he said, and his voice was calm, almost too calm for someone who had been standing in 15-degree weather. "I really need to get to Ely. My car broke down about 20 miles back, and I have been walking for hours. Ely was about 60 miles ahead, which would take about an hour at highway speeds. I figured I could drop him there and still make my delivery on time. Get in," I told him, "but I can only take you as far as Ely. After that, you are on your own." He climbed into the cab, and I noticed two strange things right away. First, he was not shivering anymore, even though he had just come in from freezing temperatures. Second, he smelled like dust and old paper, like he had been in an attic for years. I cranked up the heat anyway and got back on the highway. For the first few miles, he did not say anything. He just sat there looking out at the dark desert, occasionally glancing at the dashboard instruments like he was studying them. I tried to make small talk, asking him where he was from and what had happened to his car, but his answers were vague. He said he was from somewhere in California, and his car had just stopped running. When I asked what kind of car, he said it was old and not worth fixing. Then he said something that made my skin crawl. "You are Jennifer Parker," he said. It was not a question. "You live in Phoenix. You have been driving truck for 12 years. You have a sister named Rebecca in Denver, and you have not spoken to her in 8 months because of an argument at your mother's funeral." I nearly swerved off the road. "How the hell do you know my name?" I demanded. "How do you know about my sister?" He turned to look at me, and his eyes were completely calm. "I know a lot of things about you, Jennifer. I know you are going to Salt Lake City to deliver computer equipment. I know you took this route instead of I-80 because you wanted to avoid the traffic around Reno. I know you have been worried about whether you made the right decision leaving your last relationship." My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. This was not normal. This was not someone who had looked me up online or gotten my information somehow. He knew details about my life that no one could have known, unless they had been watching me for months. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "How do you know these things?" "My name is not important," he said. "What is important is that I am here to warn you. In about 40 minutes, you are going to see an accident on the side of the road. A pickup truck that has gone off into the ditch. You are going to think about stopping to help, but you are going to decide against it because you will be nervous about having me in your truck. You are going to drive past." "So what?" I said, my heart pounding. "What is wrong with that? The person in that truck is going to die because you do not stop. It is a woman named Sarah Mitchell. She is 28 years old, and she is on her way home to see her daughter for the first time in 6 months. She works on an oil rig in Utah, and tonight is her only night off this month. When you drive past her, she will try to flag you down, but you will not see her in time. She will freeze to death before anyone else comes along. I felt sick to my stomach. This is insane, I said. You are insane. How could you possibly know what is going to happen in 40 minutes? Because I have already lived through this night, he said. I am not from your present, Jennifer. I am from your future. 7 years from now, to be exact. And I'm here to give you the chance to change what happens tonight. I should have pulled over right then and thrown him out of my truck. But something in his voice, some quality of absolute certainty, made me keep listening. Prove it, I said. Tell me something else that is going to happen. In about 10 minutes, you are going to pass a green sedan going the opposite direction. The license plate will be Nevada TH7-429. 2 minutes after that, your CB radio is going to crackle, and you will hear a driver calling himself Midnight Mike, talking about road conditions near Elko. 5 minutes after that, you are going to see a shooting star through your windshield, and you are going to make a wish about your sister Rebecca. I did not respond. I just kept driving, watching the odometer and the clock on my dashboard. 10 minutes later, a green sedan passed me going west. I could not see the license plate clearly, but it was definitely a Nevada plate. 2 minutes after that, my CB radio came to life. This is Midnight Mike westbound near Elko, looking for a weather report. How are the roads looking east of here? I felt my blood run cold. At exactly 15 minutes, I saw a bright streak across the sky through my windshield. A shooting star. And without thinking, I made a wish that my sister and I could reconcile. The hitchhiker smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was sad, like he had seen something he wished he had not. Everything I am telling you is true, he said, and in about 25 minutes, you are going to see that truck in the ditch. When you do, I need you to stop. I need you to save Sarah Mitchell, because if you do not, it will haunt you for the rest of your life. I know because it haunted me. Wait. I said, suddenly understanding. Are you me? Are you from my future? He shook his head. No. I am someone else whose life got connected to yours because of what happens tonight. Someone who has been living with the consequences of your choice for 7 years. Someone who finally figured out how to come back and fix it. I wanted to call him crazy. I wanted to believe that this was all some elaborate scam or that I was hallucinating from exhaustion. But everything he had predicted had come true exactly as he said it would. The green sedan. The CB radio call. The shooting star. The next 25 minutes felt like an eternity. I kept my eyes glued to the road ahead, searching for any sign of a vehicle in the ditch. The hitchhiker sat quietly, not saying anything more, just looking out at the darkness. Then I saw it, tail lights pointing up at an odd angle off the right side of the road. As I got closer, I could see it was a white pickup truck that had gone into the shallow ditch. The driver's side, doctor, was open, and I could see someone moving around near the truck, waving their arms. Stop, the hitchhiker said quietly. This is it. I pulled over onto the shoulder and put on my hazard lights. As soon as I opened my door, the hitchhiker spoke one more time. When you help her, she is going to tell you about her daughter. Listen to what she says. It is important. I climbed down from my cab and walked toward the truck. A young woman in a heavy coat was standing next to it, clearly relieved to see me. She had blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and looked like she had been crying. Oh, thank God, she said. I hit some ice and went off the road. My phone does not have any signal out here. I have been trying to flag someone down for 20 minutes. Are you hurt? I asked. No, I am fine, just shaken up. I think my truck is stuck, though. I need to get home tonight. My daughter is expecting me. I helped her try to rock the truck out of the ditch, but it was stuck solid. The rear wheels just spun in the soft sand. I told her I would call a tow truck when I got cell signal, and I offered to give her a ride to Ely where she could wait for help. Thank you so much, she said. Her name was Sarah. Sarah Mitchell. Just like the hitchhiker had said. My daughter Emma is going to be so worried if I do not make it home tonight. She is only 6 years old, and I have been gone for almost 6 months. Tonight is the only night I have off this month. As we walked back to my truck, I looked for the hitchhiker in the passenger seat, but he was gone. The door was closed and locked from the inside, and there was no sign that anyone had been there. No footprints in the dirt on the shoulder, no indication that he had walked away while I was helping Sarah. I helped Sarah into the passenger seat, and she immediately commented on how warm it was. "You must have had your heater running full blast," she said. But I knew that was not why the cab was warm. The hitchhiker had been there, and somehow he had been real enough to leave the heat of his presence behind. I drove Sarah to Ely and waited with her until the tow truck arrived to pull her truck out of the ditch. While we waited, she showed me pictures of her daughter Emma on her phone. A beautiful little girl with light brown hair and her mother's smile. Sarah talked about how hard it was working away from home, but how she was doing it to save money so Emma could go to a good school. As I was getting ready to leave, Sarah hugged me. "You saved my life tonight," she said. "If you had not stopped, I do not know what would have happened. That road is so empty. It might have been hours before anyone else came along." I thought about the hitchhiker and his warning. I thought about the version of this night where I had not stopped, where Sarah had frozen to death alone in the desert. I thought about the man who claimed to be from my future, who had somehow traveled back through time to make sure I made a different choice. When I got back on the road and continued toward Salt Lake City, I kept thinking about his words. "I am someone whose life got connected to yours because of what happens tonight." It took me 3 years to figure out what he meant. 3 years of occasionally wondering about Sarah Mitchell and her daughter Emma, hoping they were doing well. Then last month I got a message through social media from a young woman named Emma Mitchell. She said her mother had told her about the truck driver who had saved her life on Highway 50 in Nevada 7 years ago, and she had finally tracked me down to say thank you. Emma is 13 now, a straight-A student who wants to be a doctor. She sent me a photo of herself and Sarah, and when I looked at it, I felt my heart stop. Standing next to them in the photo was a man in his 40s with dark hair and a thin face. Sarah's husband, Emma's father. He looked exactly like the hitchhiker who had been in my truck that night. According to Emma's message, her father's name was David Mitchell. He had died 2 years ago in a car accident, and in the photo, he was wearing a light jacket that looked torn in several places. I do not understand how it happened. I do not understand how a man who was going to die 2 years in my future managed to appear in my truck 7 years in my past. I do not understand the mechanics of time or fate or whatever force allowed him to warn me about a choice that would have destroyed so many lives. But I know what I saw. I know who was sitting in my passenger seat that night. And I know that somewhere, somehow, David Mitchell loved his daughter enough to find a way back through time to make sure she would not grow up without her mother. I still drive Highway 50 sometimes, usually at night when the stars are out and the road is empty. I always slow down near the spot where I found Sarah's truck in the ditch. And sometimes, just sometimes, I think I see a figure standing on the side of the road with his thumb out, watching the trucks pass by, making sure that this time someone stops. I have never picked up another hitchhiker since that night. I do not think I need to. I think David Mitchell was a one-time passenger, a ghost from a future that never happened, who made sure his family had the chance to stay together. And every time I see Emma's updates on social media, pictures of her excelling in school, spending time with her mother, living the life she almost never got to have, I think about the man in my truck who smelled like dust and old paper. I think about how he knew my name, my life, my future. And I think about how sometimes the most important thing we can do is stop when someone needs help, even when every instinct tells us to keep driving. Because you never know when that one small choice might change everything. You never know when the person you save might be someone's entire world. And you never know when a ghost from a future that never happened might climb into your truck to make sure you make the right choice this time. Story 3. I have been driving big rigs for 27 years now, And one of the things I am most proud of is the number of young drivers I have helped train and mentor over those years. When you spend that much time on the road, you develop a responsibility to pass on what you have learned to the next generation. Safety protocols, efficient routes, truck maintenance, how to handle difficult weather, where the best truck stops are. Even small things like the best way to set your parking brake or organize your cab for long hauls. I have probably mentored a dozen drivers over the years, and most of them have gone on to have successful careers. But what happened with one of those drivers 3 years ago still keeps me awake at night and has made me question everything I thought I knew about reading people. His name was Tyler Briggs, and I met him in the spring of 2019 at a distribution center outside of Memphis. He was maybe 25 years old, fresh out of truck driving school, and he had just been hired by the same company I worked for. The dispatcher asked if I would be willing to let him ride along with me for a few weeks to learn the routes and get some real-world experience before he started hauling loads on his own. I agreed immediately because I have always enjoyed teaching, and Tyler seemed like a good kid who was genuinely interested in learning the trade. For the first 3 weeks, everything went exactly as I expected. Tyler was attentive, asked smart questions, took notes in a little notebook he carried everywhere, and showed real aptitude for the work. I taught him my routes between Memphis and Dallas, showed him the truck stops I trusted, the way stations that were strict versus the ones that were more relaxed, and all the little shortcuts and tricks I had learned over nearly 3 decades on the road. I showed him how I did my pre-trip inspections, how I organized my logbook, even how I positioned my truck when I parked at night to make sure I had good visibility and easy exit routes in case of emergency. Looking back now, I realize that Tyler was not just learning the job. He was studying me. Every habit, every mannerism, every detail of how I conducted myself as a driver. At the time, I thought he was just being thorough and professional. I remember being impressed by how carefully he watched everything I did. One thing I particularly remember teaching him was about CB radio etiquette and safety. I showed him how to identify legitimate calls for help versus situations that might be dangerous. I told him about some close calls I had experienced over the years with people trying to lure drivers into stopping for fake emergencies. I taught him to always trust his instincts and to call the authorities rather than putting himself at risk. I thought I was giving him valuable survival skills for life on the road. After 3 weeks of riding with me, Tyler got his own truck and started running solo routes. We would still see each other occasionally, at truck stops or distribution centers, and he always made a point of thanking me for the training and telling me how helpful my mentorship had been. He seemed to be doing well, making his deliveries on time, staying out of trouble. I was proud of him. I thought he was going to be one of the success stories. Then, about 8 months after Tyler started driving solo, I began hearing strange reports from other drivers. A couple of guys I knew mentioned that they had encountered a driver on the CB radio who sounded exactly like me, using my handle and even some of my distinctive phrases. At first, I thought it was just someone playing a joke, or maybe there was another driver out there who happened to sound similar. But then the reports got more specific and more disturbing. A driver named Scott Henderson told me that he had been contacted on the CB by someone using my handle, who had asked for help with what he claimed was a mechanical problem. Scott said the voice sounded exactly like mine, used the same casual conversational style I had, and even knew details about routes and truck stops that suggested it really was me. Scott had agreed to meet this person at a rest area to help with a supposed mechanical issue. But when he got there, something felt wrong. The truck he saw did not look like mine, and when he got closer, the driver who got out was much younger. Scott said the young driver had seen him approaching and had immediately gotten back in his truck and driven away before Scott could confront him. I did not know what to make of this story at first. It seemed bizarre that someone would impersonate me on the CB radio. But then I heard similar reports from 3 other drivers over the next few weeks. Each time, someone using my voice and my handle had contacted them with some kind of request or offer to meet. And each time when the other driver showed up or got suspicious, the impersonator had disappeared quickly. I was disturbed enough by these reports that I contacted my company's safety department and the state police in Tennessee to let them know that someone was apparently impersonating me. But without any actual crimes being committed, there was not much they could do. They filed a report and told me to let them know if I heard anything more specific. Then, in November of that year, something happened that changed everything. A driver from Oklahoma named Vincent Crane disappeared while hauling a load from Little Rock to Tulsa. His truck was found abandoned at a rest area on Interstate 40 in eastern Oklahoma. The trailer had been opened and about half the cargo, which consisted of electronics and computer equipment, had been stolen. But there was no sign of Vincent. His wallet, phone, and personal belongings were still in the cab, and there were signs of a struggle. Blood was found on the driver's seat and on the pavement next to the truck. The Arkansas and Oklahoma State Police launched a major investigation into Vincent's disappearance, and as part of that investigation, they interviewed dozens of truck drivers who had been in the area around the time Vincent vanished. During those interviews, 3 different drivers mentioned that they had heard CB radio traffic involving Vincent in the hours before he disappeared. According to these witnesses, Vincent had been talking to another driver who claimed to be broke down and needed assistance. The other driver had been using a handle and a voice that several people recognized. They said it sounded like me. When the state police contacted me, I was in the middle of a run through Arkansas, not far from where Vincent had disappeared. They asked me to come in for an interview, and I agreed immediately. I told them everything I knew about the impersonator reports I had been hearing, and my suspicion that someone was deliberately using my identity on the CB radio. The detective I spoke with took my statement seriously, especially when I told him about Tyler Briggs and the extensive training I had given him. The detective asked me if Tyler would have been familiar enough with my voice and mannerisms to convincingly impersonate me, and I had to admit that yes, he probably would. Tyler had spent 3 weeks listening to me talk, hearing how I handled CB conversations, learning my habits and my routes. If anyone could impersonate me convincingly, it would be someone who had studied me that closely. The detective said they would look into Tyler's whereabouts around the time of Vincent's disappearance, but he also warned me that without direct evidence linking Tyler to the crime, there was not much they could do. Lots of drivers sound similar on CB radios, and impersonation alone was not necessarily proof of involvement in a kidnapping or theft. I left that police station feeling sick to my stomach. The idea that I might have trained someone who was now using my own techniques and my own identity to prey on other drivers was almost unbearable. I kept thinking about all the things I had taught Tyler, all the trust and knowledge I had shared, and wondering how he could have twisted that into something so evil. Over the next few months, I started doing my own investigation. I began asking around at truck stops, talking to dispatchers and other drivers, trying to track Tyler's movements and see if there were any patterns that connected him to the incidents I had heard about. What I discovered was deeply disturbing. Tyler had apparently left the company we both worked for about 2 months after Vincent's disappearance. He had told the dispatcher that he was going to work as an independent contractor, but nobody seemed to know who he was driving for now or what routes he was running. Several drivers told me they had seen him at various truck stops over the past few months, but he always seemed to disappear quickly when people tried to talk to him. I also discovered that there had been 3 other incidents similar to Vincent's disappearance over the past year. Drivers who had been robbed or assaulted after responding to CB radio calls for help. And in at least 2 of those cases, witnesses said the voice on the CB had sounded familiar, but they could not place it. One driver said the person on the radio had used phrases and terminology that reminded him of old-school truckers, the kind of language that veteran drivers used, but younger drivers usually did not know. That detail hit me hard because I knew I used a lot of old trucking terminology, phrases I had picked up in the 1990s when I first started driving. And I had specifically taught some of that language to Tyler because I thought it was part of the culture and tradition of the profession. In March of last year, I got the break I had been hoping for. I was at a truck stop outside of Little Rock, the same area where Vincent had disappeared, when I saw a truck parked at the far end of the lot that looked familiar. It was a dark blue Freightliner, similar to the one Tyler had been driving. I walked over to check it out, and even though no one was in the cab, I could see personal items inside that confirmed my suspicion. There was a notebook on the passenger seat that looked exactly like the one Tyler used to carry when he was riding with me. I called the police immediately and told them where I was and what I had found. They arrived within 20 minutes and ran the license plate on the truck. It came back registered to a leasing company under a name I did not recognize, but the detective said that was not unusual for independent contractors who wanted to hide their identity. While we were waiting for more officers to arrive, I walked around the truck and noticed something that made my blood run cold. The parking brake was set in exactly the way I had taught Tyler, with the handle positioned at a specific angle that I preferred because it was easier to release quickly in an emergency. It was a small detail, something most people would never notice, but I recognized it immediately. This was definitely Tyler's truck. The police decided to set up surveillance on the truck and wait for the driver to return. I agreed to stay in the area and help identify Tyler when he showed up. We waited for almost 6 hours, and I was starting to think he had somehow spotted us and was not coming back. But then, just before midnight, I saw him walking across the parking lot toward his truck. Even from a distance, I could see that he was dressed almost exactly the way I typically dressed. Blue jeans, company shirt, baseball cap, even the same style of work boots I wore. He was walking with the same kind of confident stride I used, shoulders slightly hunched forward from years of climbing in and out of truck cabs. It was like looking at a younger, distorted version of myself. The police moved in before he could reach his truck, and Tyler was taken into custody without incident. When they searched his truck, they found evidence that connected him to at least 4 of the incidents involving CB radio impersonation and cargo theft. They found CB radio equipment that was much more sophisticated than what most drivers used, including devices that could manipulate his voice to sound older or younger. They found notes and documents that showed he had been studying other veteran drivers besides me, learning their habits and mannerisms so he could impersonate them as well. Most disturbing of all, they found recordings. Tyler had recorded hours of my CB conversations during the time he rode with me, and he had been using those recordings to practice imitating my voice and speech patterns. The detective said it was one of the most elaborate identity theft cases he had ever seen, and the fact that it was being used to target and rob other truck drivers made it especially cruel. During the interrogation, Tyler apparently admitted to everything. He said he had gotten into trucking specifically to learn how to rob other drivers. He had deliberately sought out veteran drivers to mentor him so he could study their techniques and use them for criminal purposes. He said he had chosen me because other drivers had told him I was one of the most experienced and respected truckers in the region, and he figured that learning from me would give him the best education. He admitted to being involved in Vincent's disappearance, though he claimed he had not intended to hurt anyone seriously. According to Tyler, he had contacted Vincent on the CB using my voice and identity, claiming to have mechanical trouble at a rest area. When Vincent stopped to help, Tyler and 2 accomplices had ambushed him, tied him up, and stolen his cargo. Tyler said they had left Vincent alive in an abandoned building off the highway, and he provided the location to police. The police found Vincent 3 days later, exactly where Tyler said he would be. Vincent had been bound and left without food or water, but he was alive. He spent 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from dehydration and injuries, but he eventually made a full recovery. The physical recovery, anyway. I doubt he will ever fully recover from the psychological trauma of being betrayed by someone he thought he could trust. Tyler was charged with kidnapping, robbery, assault, and a dozen other felonies. His trial lasted 3 weeks, and I had to testify about the training I had given him and how he could have used that knowledge to commit his, crimes. It was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do, standing in that courtroom and essentially admitting that I had created this monster by teaching him everything I knew. The judge sentenced Tyler to 35 years in prison, and he will not be eligible for parole until he has served at least 25 years. But no sentence feels adequate for what he did. He did not just rob people and steal cargo, he corrupted the culture of trust and mutual assistance that is supposed to exist among truck drivers. He took the mentorship and knowledge I had shared in good faith and weaponized it against the very people I was trying to help him become part of. Since Tyler's arrest and conviction, I have struggled with guilt and second thoughts about everything I did. Should I have seen the warning signs? Were there moments during those 3 weeks when Tyler revealed his true nature and I just did not notice? I have replayed every conversation, every training session, every interaction we had, looking for clues that I missed. But I cannot find them. Tyler was careful, methodical, and patient. He played the role of an eager student perfectly, and I never suspected he had ulterior motives. The hardest part is knowing that other drivers do not trust me the way they used to. When my voice comes over the CB radio now, there is always a moment of hesitation, a pause where I can tell people are wondering if it is really me, or if it is someone impersonating me. Some drivers have stopped responding to my calls altogether, afraid that they might be falling for another one of Tyler's tricks, even though he is in prison. I have also stopped mentoring new drivers. My company has asked me several times to train rookies, but I cannot bring myself to do it. The idea of teaching someone all my knowledge and techniques, only to have them potentially use it for harm, is too much for me to handle. I know that is probably an overreaction, that Tyler was an exception rather than the rule, but I cannot shake the feeling that I am responsible for what he became. I still drive my regular routes, and I still use my CB radio, but everything feels different now. The roads that used to feel like home now feel dangerous. The community of drivers that used to feel like family now feels suspicious and guarded. Tyler did not just rob cargo and hurt people. He stole something more fundamental, the basic trust that makes it possible for us to help each other and watch out for each other on these lonely highways. Vincent Crane, the driver who was kidnapped and left to die, has understandably left trucking entirely. He told me during the trial that he could never get back in a truck without remembering what happened to him, without wondering if every voice on the CB might be another predator waiting to strike. I do not blame him at all. Part of me wishes I had the courage to walk away from trucking like he did. But driving is all I know. It has been my life for 27 years. These highways are in my blood. So I keep driving, even though every time I hear a young driver's voice on the CB asking for advice or help, I feel my stomach tighten with fear and suspicion. I want to believe that most people are good, that most young drivers are genuinely interested in learning the trade and being part of this community. But Tyler taught me that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who look like students. I think about Tyler every day, wondering what turned him into the person he became. Was he always planning to use his trucking knowledge for crime? Or did something happen during those 3 weeks he rode with me that pushed him in that direction? Did I say something or teach him something that gave him the idea? I will probably never know the answers to those questions, but they haunt me nonetheless. The detective who handled the case told me I should not blame myself, that Tyler made his own choices, and I cannot be held responsible for how he used the knowledge I shared. He said that without my cooperation and willingness to help with the investigation, they might never have caught Tyler, and more drivers might have been hurt. He said I should be proud that I did the right thing in the end. But pride is not what I feel when I think about this situation. What I feel is sadness and loss. Sadness for the drivers who were hurt by Tyler's actions. Loss of the innocence and trust that used to make this profession feel like a brotherhood. And a deep, nagging sense that I played a role in creating something terrible. I still see Tyler's face sometimes when I close my eyes. That eager young driver who seemed so interested in learning, who took such careful notes, who thanked me repeatedly for my mentorship. I wonder if any of that was real, or if it was all an act designed to get close to me and extract the information he needed. I wonder if he ever felt even a moment of genuine respect or gratitude, or if I was just a target from the very beginning. The most disturbing thing I learned during the trial was that Tyler had told investigators he chose trucking specifically because he saw veteran drivers as easy targets. He said older truckers were trusting and eager to share their knowledge, and that made them perfect marks for someone willing to exploit that generosity. He said he had initially planned to rob me directly, but decided there was more value in learning from me and then using that knowledge to rob many others. That revelation broke something in me. The idea that my willingness to help, my pride in my experience, my desire to pass on what I had learned, all of that had been seen as weakness, as an exploitable vulnerability. It made me question every interaction I have had with younger drivers over the years. How many of them were genuinely interested in learning? And how many saw me as just another potential victim? I know that is a cynical way to think. I know that most people are not like Tyler, that most young drivers genuinely want to learn and build careers in trucking. But once that seed of doubt has been planted, it is almost impossible to remove. Tyler did not just rob trucks and hurt drivers. He poisoned the well of trust and mentorship that has sustained this profession for generations. I am 52 years old now, and I probably have another 10 to 15 years of driving left before I retire. I used to think about those years with anticipation, looking forward to more miles on the road, more sunrises and sunsets through my windshield, more time doing the work I love. But now I just feel tired. Tired of watching my mirrors for threats. Tired of questioning people's motives. Tired of carrying the weight of what Tyler did with the knowledge I gave him. Sometimes I wonder if there are other Tylers out there. Other predators who are studying veteran drivers, learning our habits and techniques, waiting for the right moment to use that knowledge against us. The police said Tyler was working with accomplices who have never been identified. Those people are still out there somewhere, still using the skills and strategies that Tyler learned from me. That thought keeps me awake at night more than anything else. The idea that Tyler's crimes are ongoing in some form, that the corruption I unknowingly helped create is still spreading through the trucking community like a disease. Every time I hear about a driver being robbed or assaulted, I wonder if it is connected to Tyler's network. Every time I see a familiar truck or hear a familiar voice that seems slightly off, I wonder if it is one of his accomplices impersonating another veteran driver. The road used to be my sanctuary, the place where I felt most at home and most at peace. Now it feels like a hunting ground where I never know if I am the hunter or the prey. And the worst part is knowing that I helped create the very danger I am now afraid of. I wish I could say that time has healed these wounds, that I have found a way to forgive myself and move forward. But that would be a lie. Every day I carry the guilt of what happened, and every day I wonder if I will ever be able to trust another young driver who asks for my help. Tyler Briggs took more from me than just my identity and my reputation. He took my faith in the basic goodness of people, and I do not know if I will ever get that back. Story 4. I have been driving truck for 13 years now, and in all that time I have learned to trust my instincts. When something feels wrong on the road, it usually is wrong. But what happened to me on Highway 2 through the Nebraska sandhills in March of 2019 defied every instinct I had and every rational explanation I could come up with. Some nights I still wake up wondering if those other drivers are still out there, still following their route through the darkness, trapped in something I barely escaped from. It was the third week of March, and I was hauling a load of farming equipment from Grand Island to Alliance, a route that takes you straight through the heart of the sandhills. If you have never driven through that part of Nebraska, it is hard to describe just how isolated it can be. Mile after mile of rolling grass-covered dunes with maybe a ranch house every 20 miles, and almost no towns to speak of. During the day, it has a stark beauty to it, but at night, it is one of the loneliest stretches of road in America. I left Grand Island around 6 in the evening, planning to make Alliance by midnight and grab a few hours of sleep before my morning delivery. The weather forecast had mentioned possible fog, but nothing that seemed concerning. I had driven through plenty of fog before, and Highway 2 is a straight, well-maintained road with good shoulders. I figured it would be a routine run. The fog started rolling in around 8:30, just as the last light was fading from the sky. At first, it was just wisps drifting across the highway, but within 20 minutes it had become a solid wall of gray that reduced my visibility to maybe 30 feet. I slowed down to about 45 miles per hour and turned on my fog lights, settling in for a long, careful drive through the sandhills. I'd been driving in the fog for about an hour when I first noticed the lights behind me. They appeared suddenly in my mirrors, 2 sets of headlights that seemed to materialize out of the fog maybe 100 yards back. I figured it was a couple of trucks that had caught up to me, which was fine. Having other vehicles around actually made me feel better about driving in such poor visibility. But then I noticed something strange about the way they were following me. They were maintaining an exact distance, never getting closer or falling back, just staying perfectly positioned about 100 yards behind my trailer. And they were not just two trucks. As I watched my mirrors more carefully, I could see more lights appearing behind the first two. 4 trucks, then 6, then 8. Within 10 minutes, there were at least a dozen sets of headlights behind me, all spaced evenly apart, all maintaining the exact same speed I was driving. It looked like a convoy, which you sometimes see when truckers are traveling together for safety or company. But something about this convoy felt wrong. There was no chatter on the CB radio, no communication between the drivers, just silence and those perfectly spaced lights following me through the fog. I grabbed my CB handset and called out on Channel 19. "This is Cornhusker Express westbound on Highway 2. Anybody in this convoy want to identify themselves? I'm seeing about a dozen trucks behind me and nobody is talking. Static. Nothing but empty static." I tried again, this time on Channel 17. "Any westbound trucks on Highway 2 near Thedford? This is the blue Freightliner hauling farm equipment. Can anybody hear me?" Still nothing. Just that persistent static and the ghostly lights in my mirrors, following me through the fog with mechanical precision. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe they were a convoy that was using a different channel, or maybe they had their radios turned off. Maybe they were just trying to get through the fog safely and were using my taillights as a guide. There could be a dozen innocent explanations. But my gut was telling me something different. That is, when I decided to test them. I slowed down gradually, dropping from 45 to 40 to 35 miles per hour. The lights behind me slowed down exactly the same amount, maintaining that perfect 100-yard distance. I sped back up to 50. They matched my speed instantly. It was like they were connected to my truck somehow, mirroring my every move. The isolation of the sandhills was starting to get to me. We had not passed a single ranch house or side road in over an hour. There was nowhere to turn off, nowhere to stop except the narrow shoulder. I was stuck on this highway with a dozen trucks following me like shadows, and I had no idea who they were or what they wanted. I tried the CB radio again, this time broadcasting on multiple channels. "This is an emergency call. I am westbound on Highway 2 with multiple vehicles following me in a suspicious manner. Can anybody hear this? Is there a state trooper monitoring this frequency?" The response I got made my blood run cold. It was not words exactly, more like a sound. A low, rhythmic pulsing that came through every channel I tried. It sounded almost mechanical, like the idling of a dozen truck engines perfectly synchronized. And underneath that sound, I could hear something else. Voices, maybe, or wind, or something I could not identify. It was the kind of sound that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I switched off the CB radio completely. The silence in my cab was suddenly oppressive, broken only by the hum of my own engine and the steady rhythm of my wipers clearing moisture from the windshield. I focused on the road ahead, trying to ignore the lights in my mirrors. "Just keep driving," I told myself. "You will reach Whitman eventually, and you can pull into town and figure out what is going on." But Whitman never came. I should have reached it around 10 o'clock based on my distance and speed. But 10 o'clock came and went with nothing but fog and empty highway. 10:30, 11. Still nothing. But the road ahead and those lights behind me. I checked my odometer and realized I had driven over 80 miles since entering the fog, which should have put me well past Whitman and nearly to Alliance. But there were no town lights, no highway signs, nothing to indicate civilization existed anywhere near this road. My gas gauge was dropping faster than it should have been too. I had filled up in Grand Island with enough fuel to make Alliance with plenty to spare, but now my gauge was showing less than a quarter tank. It was like the road itself was draining my fuel, keeping me trapped in this nightmare drive through the fog. That was when I saw the first truck on the shoulder. It was pulled over on the right side of the highway, A big white Peterbilt with its hazard lights flashing weakly through the fog. As I drove past it, I could see it was old. Not just old, but ancient. A model from maybe the 1970s with the kind of chrome and paint job you only see at truck shows. And there was something else. The truck was covered in a layer of dust or grime so thick it looked like it had been sitting there for years. Half a mile later, there was another one. A green Kenworth from the 80s, also pulled over with its lights on, also covered in that strange, thick coating. Then another, and another. Every half mile or so, there was another abandoned truck on the shoulder, all of them old models, all of them looking like they had been there far longer than a few hours. I was passing the 7th or 8th abandoned truck when I made the mistake of looking more carefully at one of them. It was close enough to the road that my headlights illuminated the cab, and I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. A man, motionless, staring straight ahead. His face was gray and his eyes were open but empty. He had been dead for a very long time. I jerked my attention back to the road, my heart hammering in my chest. I did not want to look at any more of those abandoned trucks. I did not want to know if they all had dead drivers sitting in them, waiting for nothing in the endless fog. The convoy behind me was still there, still maintaining that perfect distance. But now I understood what they were. These were not other truckers. These were the same trucks I was passing on the shoulder, or they had been once. These were the trucks that had made it onto Highway 2 and never made it off, trapped in some kind of loop that kept them driving forever through the fog. I needed to get off this road. I did not care about my delivery anymore, or my job, or anything except getting away from this nightmare. But how do you escape from a road that seems to have no end? I tried slowing down to a near stop, thinking maybe I could force the trucks behind me to pass and see what they really were. But as my speed dropped below 20 miles per hour, the lights behind me started getting closer. Not slowly, but rapidly, closing the distance like they were accelerating toward me. I could see the shapes of the trucks now through the fog, and they did not look right. The proportions were wrong, stretched and distorted like reflections in a funhouse mirror. I floored the accelerator and my truck lurched forward, building speed as fast as the heavy load would allow. The lights fell back to their original distance, resuming that careful 100-yard gap. They wanted me to keep moving, to keep driving at a steady pace. They wanted me to join them in their endless convoy through the fog. That was when I remembered something a dispatcher had told me years ago about getting lost in bad weather. He said if you ever feel like you are going in circles or trapped on a road, do something unexpected. Break the pattern. Do not follow the rules. I made a decision that probably saved my life. I jerked my steering wheel hard to the right and drove my truck straight off the highway into the grassland beyond the shoulder. The truck bounced and lurched over the rough ground and my load shifted dangerously in the trailer. But I did not care. I just needed to get off that road. Behind me, I could hear a sound that I will never forget. It was like a massive exhalation of disappointment, a wind that seemed to come from all directions at once. The lights of the convoy scattered and dissolved into the fog, and suddenly I was alone in the darkness with just my headlights illuminating the prairie grass ahead. I drove for maybe 10 minutes over the rough terrain, my truck protesting every bump and hole. Then suddenly I crashed through a barbed wire fence and found myself on another road. A narrow county road, but it had signs, real signs with route numbers and distance markers. I turned west and drove for another hour, eventually hitting Highway 385, which I knew would take me north to Alliance. When I finally pulled into a truck stop outside Alliance around 2 in the morning, I was shaking so badly I could barely turn off the engine. I sat in my cab for 20 minutes, just breathing and trying to process what had happened. Then I went inside and asked the clerk about Highway 2 and whether there had been any reports of fog or accidents. She looked at me strangely and said, Highway 2 had been closed for the past 6 hours due to a multi-vehicle pileup near Whitman. There was no way I could have been driving on it, she said. The road had been completely blocked since 7 that evening. I did not argue with her. I just went back to my truck and looked at my dash camera footage, hoping it had captured something that would prove I was not losing my mind. But the footage was corrupted. Every frame from the time I entered the fog until I drove off the road was just static and digital noise. The only clear image was a single frame that appeared randomly in the corrupted section. It showed the view through my windshield, but instead of fog, it showed dozens of trucks stretched out ahead of me in a perfect line, disappearing into the distance. And every single one of them was empty. No drivers, just empty cabs with their lights on, driving themselves through the darkness. I delivered my load the next morning and told my dispatcher I was taking a different route back to Grand Island. He tried to tell me Highway 2 was the fastest way, but I refused. I have never driven Highway 2 through the Sandhills again, and I never will. About a month after my experience, I started researching accidents and disappearances on that stretch of highway. What I found made my blood run cold. Since 1982, at least 19 truck drivers had disappeared while driving Highway 2 through the Sandhills. Their trucks were usually found abandoned on the shoulder, sometimes with the engine still running. The drivers were never found. In several cases, other motorists reported seeing convoys of trucks driving through heavy fog, but when police investigated, no trucks could be located. One report from 2003 particularly stuck with me. A sheriff's deputy had been called to investigate an abandoned truck on Highway 2. When he approached the vehicle, he said he heard the sound of dozens of truck engines in the distance, even though the highway was completely empty as far as he could see. He also reported that his radio began picking up CB chatter, but when he tried to respond, the voices did not seem to hear him. They just kept talking about their routes, their deliveries, their families waiting at home. He said it sounded like listening to conversations from decades ago, like echoes of drivers who had traveled that road long before. I think about those 19 missing drivers a lot. I wonder if they are still out there somehow, still driving their routes through the fog, part of that phantom convoy that prowls Highway 2 looking for new members. I wonder if the man I saw sitting dead in his cab was one of them, or if he was something worse, something that had been there even longer. The thing that haunts me most is a thought I cannot shake. When I drove off the road to escape the convoy, I broke free because I did something unexpected. I refused to follow the pattern. But how many of those other drivers tried the same thing? How many of them drove off into the grassland thinking they were escaping, only to find themselves right back on the highway, trapped in the loop forever? I still drive truck and I still haul loads all over the Midwest, but I have a new rule now. If I ever find myself driving through fog with a line of trucks following me in perfect formation, if I ever hear that strange pulsing sound on my CB radio, if I ever see those abandoned trucks on the shoulder with their lights still burning, I am driving straight off the road, and I am not stopping until I hit civilization. Because I know what is waiting out there in the fog. I know about the convoy that never stops, never ends, never reaches its destination. And I know that next time, I might not be lucky enough to escape. Story 5. I have been driving truck for exactly 9 months now, and I already thought I had seen everything the road could throw at me. Rain so hard you cannot see your own hood, traffic jams that stretch for 20 miles, drivers who think 18-wheelers can stop on a dime. But what happened to me on Interstate 40 through the Texas Panhandle last February showed me that the road holds mysteries that go way beyond bad weather and careless drivers. Some nights I still wake up trying to make sense of it, and I honestly do not know if I ever will. My name is Kyle Brennan, and I am a rookie driver. Just graduated from truck driving school the previous summer. I had been running regional routes for a company out of Oklahoma City, mostly short hauls between Texas and Kansas. Nothing too complicated. The money was not great, but I was building experience and learning the ropes. My dispatcher had been pretty good about giving me daytime runs in decent weather conditions while I got my feet under me. But that all changed when they asked me to take an emergency run from Amarillo to Albuquerque in the middle of February. The load was medical supplies that needed to get to a hospital in New Mexico by the next morning, and the regular driver had called in sick. My dispatcher said the weather forecast looked clear and the route was straightforward. just Interstate 40 west through the Panhandle and into New Mexico. The pay was double my normal rate because of the emergency nature of the haul, and I needed the money. So I said yes, even though I had never driven through that area in winter before, and I had never done an overnight run by myself. Everything started out fine. I picked up the load around 6 in the evening and headed west out of Amarillo just as the sun was setting. The sky was clear and the roads were dry. My GPS showed about 6 hours to Albuquerque, which would put me there around midnight with plenty of time to spare. I had my CB radio tuned to channel 19, listening to other drivers chat about road conditions and truck stop food. Everything felt normal and safe. But about an hour into the drive, somewhere around Wildorado, I started seeing weather reports on the CB that made my stomach tight. Drivers coming eastbound were talking about snow starting to fall near the New Mexico border. At first, it sounded manageable, just light flurries that were not sticking to the pavement. But then the reports got worse. By the time I reached Vega, drivers were saying the snow was getting heavier and visibility was dropping fast. I pulled into a truck stop in Vega to check the weather radar on my phone and decide whether to keep going or wait out the storm. The radar showed a massive system moving down from Colorado, and it was going to hit the entire Panhandle within the next hour. The Weather Service had issued a winter storm warning with predictions of 8 to 12 inches of snow and near-zero visibility. Any smart driver would have parked his truck and waited for the storm to pass. But I was a rookie with something to prove. I called my dispatcher and told him about the weather, hoping he would tell me to stop and wait it out. Instead, he reminded me that the medical supplies were critical and that the hospital was counting on the delivery. He said other drivers had made it through worse conditions and that I just needed to take it slow and be careful. Looking back, I should have refused. But I was new and I wanted to show that I could handle whatever the job threw at me. I filled up my fuel tanks, grabbed 2 thermoses of coffee from the truck stop, and got back on Interstate 40 heading west. For the first 20 miles, the weather was not too bad. Light snow was falling, but I could still see the road clearly and traffic was moving at a decent speed. I kept the CB radio on, listening to other drivers report their positions and conditions. There were maybe a dozen trucks on the road that night, all of us, heading west into the storm. That was when everything changed. Around milepost 18, just past Adrian, the snow suddenly got much heavier. Within maybe 5 minutes, it went from light flurries to a full blizzard. The wind picked up and started rocking my trailer back and forth. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 feet, then 20 feet, then almost nothing. I slowed down to about 30 miles per hour, then 20, then 15. I could barely see the white lines on the road, and the snow was coming down so hard that my wipers could not keep up. Other drivers started pulling over, their voices crackling over the CB saying they were going to wait out the worst of it. I should have done the same thing. But I was afraid that if I pulled over on the shoulder, another truck might not see me in the whiteout conditions and slam into me from behind. So I kept creeping forward, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white, my eyes straining to see anything in front of me. That was when I saw the taillights. They appeared out of the snow maybe 30 feet ahead of me, 2 red lights glowing in the whiteness. Another truck moving steadily westbound, and clearly the driver knew what he was doing because he was maintaining a perfect line down the highway. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. If I could just follow those taillights, I would be okay. The driver ahead of me obviously had more experience with winter driving, and I could let him lead the way through the storm. I matched his speed and kept my distance, staying about 20 feet behind him. The taillights were my lifeline, the only thing I could see in the swirling white chaos. Every time I started to panic about not being able to see the road, I would focus on those 2 red lights and remind myself that someone else was out here with me, someone who knew what they were doing. The strange thing was, the truck ahead never wavered, never slowed down, never sped up, never drifted to one side or the other. In conditions where I was fighting the steering wheel every second to keep my truck between the ditches, the vehicle ahead was tracking perfectly straight down the highway. I remember thinking that the driver must have nerves of steel and years of experience to navigate so confidently through a blizzard. I tried calling out on the CB radio several times to thank the driver ahead of me for being there. "Hey, this is the Freightliner following the westbound truck near milepost 15. Just wanted to say thanks for being out here. Makes me feel a lot less alone." But I never got a response. Maybe his CB was turned off, or maybe he was just too focused on driving to answer. Either way, I kept following those taillights through the storm. Time became strange out there in the blizzard. I lost track of how long I had been driving. My GPS had stopped working about 20 minutes into the worst of the storm, the screen frozen on a location that I had passed miles ago. My clock said it had been maybe an hour since I first saw the taillights, but it felt like much longer. The world had shrunk down to just me, my truck, and those two red lights ahead of me. Nothing else existed. Every few minutes, I would try the CB radio again, calling out to the truck ahead or to any other drivers who might be out there. But the radio had gone silent. No voices, no static, just dead air. That should have worried me more than it did, but I was too focused on those taillights to think about anything else. As long as I could see those lights, I knew I was still on the road and still moving in the right direction. The blizzard went on and on. The snow never let up. The wind never stopped howling, and visibility never got better than maybe 10 feet. I had no idea where I was or how far I had traveled. My fuel gauge was dropping, but I could not risk stopping to check my location or call for help. All I could do was follow those taillights and trust that the driver ahead knew where he was going. Then something started to bother me, something I could not quite put my finger on. The truck ahead never hit a rough patch or bounced over a pothole. In weather like this, with snow covering the road, you would expect to hit ice patches or uneven pavement or debris blown onto the highway. But the ride behind those taillights was smooth, almost too smooth, and the taillights themselves never flickered or dimmed, even though snow and ice should have been building up on them. I tried to get a better look at the truck ahead, but all I could see were those two red lights. I could not make out the shape of the trailer or see any running lights or reflectors, just those two taillights, glowing steady and bright in the whiteness. It was like following a ghost through a white void. By the third hour, I was starting to feel exhausted. The constant concentration, the stress of driving in zero visibility, the fear of sliding off the road or hitting something, it was all wearing me down. My eyes burned from staring at the snow, and my back ached from being tensed up for so long. I kept telling myself that the storm had to end soon, that we had to be getting close to the New Mexico border where the weather might be better. And then, suddenly, it was over. The snow stopped like someone had flipped a switch. One second I was driving through a complete whiteout, and the next second the air was clear. The wind died down, the snowflakes stopped falling, and I could see the highway stretching out ahead of me under a sky full of stars. The relief I felt lasted about 5 seconds. Then I realized something was terribly wrong. The highway ahead of me was empty, completely empty. No truck, no taillights, no vehicle of any kind, just smooth, unbroken snow covering the road for as far as I could see. I slammed on my brakes and my truck slid to a stop in the fresh snow. My heart was pounding and my mind was racing. Where did the truck go? There were no exit ramps, no side roads, nowhere the vehicle could have turned off. The highway was a straight line through flat country, and I should have been able to see taillights for miles if the truck was still ahead of me. But there was nothing. I grabbed my CB microphone with shaking hands. "Hello, westbound truck. I was following your taillights. Where did you go? Are you out there?" Nothing. Dead silence on the radio. I switched channels, trying 19, 17, 9, every frequency I knew. No response, no static, no sign that anyone else was out there. That was when I noticed the snow. The road ahead of me was covered in fresh, unbroken snow. If another truck had been driving ahead of me just seconds ago, there should have been tire tracks, clear as day in the fresh powder. But there were no tracks. The snow was pristine and smooth, like no vehicle had driven over it in hours. I put my truck in park and just sat there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I had been following tail lights for 3 hours. I was sure of it. Those lights had guided me through the worst blizzard I had ever seen. But the evidence in front of me said that was impossible. No truck, no tracks, no sign that anyone else had been on this highway. My hands were shaking as I reached for the controls of my dash cam. I had installed a camera system when I started driving, a front-facing camera that recorded everything. If I had been following another truck, it would be there on the recording. I rewound the footage and started playing it back, starting from when I first entered the blizzard. What I saw on that screen made my blood run cold. The footage showed me driving through the storm alone. The entire time I thought I was following taillights. The camera showed nothing ahead of me but swirling snow. I watched myself navigate through impossible conditions, my truck somehow staying perfectly centered on the highway even though I could not see anything. No taillights, no other vehicle, nothing. I fast-forwarded through the footage, hoping to see something, anything that would explain what had happened. But every frame showed the same thing. Me driving alone through a blizzard, somehow managing to stay on the road through conditions where I should have gone into a ditch or off a cliff. It was like someone had been guiding my hands on the steering wheel, keeping me safe when I could not keep myself safe. I was sitting there staring at the dash cam screen when I heard a sound that made me jump. It was my CB radio and it was beeping. The radio was recording a message, even though I had not heard anything come through. I grabbed the microphone and checked the saved messages. There was one new recording, time-stamped from about an hour ago, right in the middle of the worst part of the storm. I hit play with a trembling finger. The voice that came out of the speaker made me drop the microphone. "Follow me, little brother. I will get you home safe. Just keep your eyes on my lights and do not stop. You are doing good, Kyle. Real good. I am proud of you." I sat there with tears running down my face, because I knew that voice. I knew it better than any voice in the world. It was my older brother, Trent. Trent Brennan, who had been driving truck for 12 years before he died. He had been my hero, my mentor, the person who convinced me to become a truck driver in the first place, and he had died in a crash on this exact stretch of Interstate 40 in 2015, 6 years before this night. Trent had been heading westbound through the Panhandle when he hit a patch of black ice. His truck went off the road and rolled. They said he died instantly. I was 15 years old when it happened, and his death had devastated our family. But he had always told me that trucking was in our blood, that the road would take care of us if we respected it. And when I turned 21, I had enrolled in truck driving school to follow in his footsteps. Now here I was, 6 years after his death, listening to his voice on my CB radio, a voice that had somehow guided me through a blizzard that should have killed me. I played the message 3 more times, just to make sure I was not imagining it. But every time, it was Trent's voice, clear as day, telling me to follow him and promising to keep me safe. I checked my GPS, which had finally started working again now that the storm had passed. According to the map, I was about 10 miles from the New Mexico border, exactly where Trent had crashed 6 years ago. I had somehow driven through 3 hours of zero-visibility blizzard conditions and ended up exactly where I needed to be, without going off the road, without hitting anything, without making a single wrong turn. I finished the drive to Albuquerque in a daze, delivered the medical supplies, and checked into a motel near the hospital. I did not sleep at all that night. I just kept playing the CB message over and over, listening to my brother's voice telling me he was proud of me. When I called my mom the next morning, I could barely get the words out. I told her everything that had happened, and I played the message for her over the phone. She broke down crying. "That is him," she said between sobs. "That is my boy. That is Trent." I asked her if she thought I was crazy, if she thought I had imagined the whole thing. But she said no. She said Trent had always promised to watch over me, and that if anyone could find a way to keep that promise from beyond the grave, it would be him. I drove back to Oklahoma City the next day. taking a southern route that avoided Interstate 40. I could not bring myself to drive through the Panhandle again, not after what had happened. When I got home, I made a copy of the CB recording and sent it to several audio experts, hoping they could tell me if it was somehow fake or if the radio had picked up an old transmission. But every expert said the same thing. The recording was genuine, captured by my radio in real time during the storm. There was no explanation for how a message from 6 years ago could suddenly appear on a modern digital CB radio. I kept driving truck after that night, but I changed my routes to avoid Interstate 40 in winter. I could not risk going through that area again, could not risk finding out if what happened was a one-time miracle or something that could happen again. Other drivers think I am superstitious or crazy, but I do not care. I know what happened to me out there in that blizzard, and I know who saved my life. Every time I get in my truck, now, I say a quiet, thank you to Trent. Thank you for watching over me. Thank you for getting me home safe. I keep the CB recording saved on 3 different devices, and sometimes, when I'm feeling alone or scared on the road, I play it and hear my brother's voice one more time. Follow me, little brother. I will get you home safe. People ask me if I believe in ghosts now, if I think the dead can come back to help the living. I tell them I do not know about any of that, but I know my brother saved my life on Interstate 40 that night. I know I followed his taillights through a storm that should have killed me. And I know that somewhere out there, Trent Brennan is still driving the highways, still watching over rookie drivers who get in over their heads, still keeping his promise to take care of his little brother. I have been driving for 9 months now, but in some ways, I am still following those taillights through the storm, still trusting that someone who loves me is out there, keeping me safe. That is what saved me that night. Not skill, not luck, but love that was strong enough to reach across 6 years and guide me home through the darkness. The road can be a lonely place, and it can be dangerous. But I learned that night that we are never really alone out there. The drivers who came before us, who gave their lives to the highway, they are still with us in ways we cannot always see or understand. They are the lights in the darkness, the voices on the radio when we need them most, the hands guiding our steering wheels when we cannot see where we are going. I will never forget that night on Interstate 40. I will never forget following those ghost lights through the blizzard, or hearing my brother's voice telling me everything would be okay. And I will never stop being grateful that Trent found a way to keep his promise, even from beyond the grave. He said he would always watch over me, and he did. He saved my life, and he has been dead for 6 years. That is my story. That is what happened to me in the Texas Panhandle during the blizzard of February 2021. You can believe it or not, I do not really care. I know what I experienced, and I know my brother was with me that night, and every time I drive through a storm now, I keep my CB radio on channel 19, just in case I hear his voice again, just in case he needs to guide another lost driver home through the darkness.